Harley Davidson just did the unthinkable and didn't say a word. No press release, no hype, just one number dropped like a bomb, $9,999. After years of chasing luxury and losing its soul, Harley might finally be waking up. Is this a comeback or a final surrender? Stick around. The twist hits harder than the engine ever could. The comeback nobody expected. This move didn't happen out of goodwill. It happened because Harley Davidson had no choice. When the company quietly shifted production of some models to Thailand, it wasn't just chasing cheaper labor. It was trying to survive in a global economic war zone. Tariffs, trade wars, rising production costs. Harley's pricing problem didn't just come from greed, it came from a broken system where making motorcycles in the United States became a liability. By moving production to Thailand, Harley regained control of its margins, and in doing so, it opened the door to bring prices down where they mattered most, in America. This wasn't a retreat from patriotism, it was a tactic to avoid bleeding out. Harley couldn't afford to keep building every component onshore while foreign competitors flooded the market with cheaper, just as capable alternatives. So they made a decision, one that loyalists may scoff at, but one that saved them from total collapse. And there's proof it works. The Nightster, now significantly cheaper, wouldn't exist in its current form without that global supply chain. Harley didn't beat tariffs, they designed around them, and in doing so, they positioned themselves to strike back in a segment they'd quietly abandoned. Compare that to Livewire. Harley's electric spinoff launched with futuristic ambition and premium price tags, completely disconnected from their core rider base. That gamble hasn't paid off, and the Nightster is everything Livewire wasn't. Grounded, mechanical, loud, and real. What Harley did in Thailand may not earn them patriotic praise, but it bought them something more valuable: time. And with that time, they're finally doing something they should have done years ago. The missed window that let Indian win. While Harley stayed silent, Indian kept talking to the people Harley forgot. Between 2020 and 2024, Indian Motorcycles held the line with the Scout 60, a muscular, stripped-down cruiser priced under $10,000, built to do exactly what Harley used to do: give new riders a reason to walk into the showroom. The absence of a true entry-level Harley left a void, and Indian filled it. Riders who might have defaulted to Harley a decade earlier now had a new option, one with performance, style, and accessibility. They didn't need to be convinced. They just needed to compare price tags. The result? Indian didn't just gain customers, they built loyalty. Because here's the thing about motorcycles. For many, the first one defines the journey. Brand habit is real. If a rider's first cruiser is an Indian and that experience is good, why would they switch? They'll move up the ladder within the Indian lineup. They'll buy gear, they'll join that community, and slowly but surely, they'll forget that Harley was ever supposed to be their destination. Harley's silence in those critical years wasn't neutral. It was permission. Permission for Indian to build a base, permission for Honda to slide in, permission for an entire new class of rider to build loyalty somewhere else. Now that Harley is back with a sub-$10,000 model, the market has already shifted, and regaining that trust, that's going to take more than price. Now, if you're still watching, you're invested in Harley Davidson's next move. The good thing is, we've broken down the strategy and market shifts so you don't have to. And if this insight has helped you make sense of Harley's path, hit subscribe now. We're here to deliver sharp, no-fluff updates daily. But now let's dive deeper into what Harley Davidson's comeback means in practical terms, the actual numbers behind the Nightster, how the value war has begun. It all comes down to numbers, not just the price tag, but the power, the torque the ride feel. The Harley Davidson Nightster delivers 90 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque from a 975 cubic centimeter engine. That is serious muscle for its class. Now put it next to the Indian Scout 60, lower on torque, lower on horsepower, but not by much. And it carries the legacy of consistency. Then stack it against the Honda Rebel 1100, an import that delivers smooth performance, modern tech, and a price just under $10,000. That bike in many ways has redefined what entry-level means. So where does Harley stand? Performance-wise, they're back in the fight. In value, it depends on who you ask. Longtime Harley fans might call the Nightster a triumph. Younger buyers, however, may still hesitate. Why? Because value today isn't just about numbers, it's about belief. And Harley's reputation for some still carries the stigma of overpriced chrome and outdated thinking. Younger riders do not shop on legacy. They shop on return. They do math, not myth. If Harley wants to win this war, it needs to do more than offer a great bike. It needs to prove that great bikes are all they care about, because right now, they might finally have the better machine. The real question is whether they still have the buyer. When the price of entry becomes a wall. There was a time when owning a Harley Davidson was a realistic dream for the working class. A machine that symbolized freedom, grit, and rebellion didn't just sit in luxury showrooms, it lived in driveways, garages, and roadside diners across America. The barrier to entry wasn't a bank-breaking investment. A modest Sportster, stripped down and mean, could be yours for less than what many families spend on a vacation. That's what made Harley different. It was aspirational, but never out of reach. Today, that image has rusted. Walk into a dealership now and the numbers staring back at you feel more Wall Street than working class. A base Softail model now starts at more than $17,000. A lowrider ST, you're looking at $28,000 before you even think about accessories or dealer markups. For context, that's a down payment on a house in many American towns. That's a full year of tuition at a public university. That's a fully financed, gently used Toyota Camry with low miles. Harley's message to its core demographic, the blue-collar backbone that once built its empire, has shifted from "you belong here" to "if you can afford it." The problem isn't just inflation, the problem is perception. Motorcycles have always been about more than horsepower and chrome, they're about belonging. And for a growing number of potential riders, Harley Davidson no longer feels like home. It feels like a gated community they weren't invited into. Financing one of these bikes at current rates, often 12% or higher through Harley Davidson's in-house lending, means the monthly payment rivals what many people pay for rent. You're not just buying a bike, you're buying into a premium lifestyle brand with a premium price tag. And for many, that's a cost too steep to stomach. This is how a brand loses its footing. Not in a single dramatic moment, but through slow erosion, through thousands of lost sales from people who still want a Harley but can't justify it, who still admire the badge but shake their heads at the sticker, who still scroll through photos of fat bobs and road glides but ultimately settle for something else. Not because they gave up on the dream, but because the dream gave up on them. Red, white, and assembled overseas. As the prices climbed, something else happened, quieter but equally damaging. The illusion of Harley Davidson as a proudly American-made product began to fade. For generations, buying a Harley wasn't just a transaction, it was a declaration. You weren't just getting a motorcycle. You were investing in American steel, American workers, and American pride. The logo was draped in flags and soaked in heritage. Now lift the seat on many of Harley's newest models, and you'll find a very different story. Increasingly, core components are sourced from overseas, Thailand, Mexico, even China. Assembly may still happen on domestic soil for some models, but the guts, the electronics, the very heart of the machine is often foreign-born. To a globalized corporation, that might make financial sense. To the average Harley loyalist, it feels like a betrayal. This isn't about xenophobia. It's about authenticity. It's about the promise that when you buy a Harley, you're backing something American. Not just in branding, but in fact. When that promise erodes, so does the emotional connection that justifies the price. You can't sell freedom wrapped in stars and stripes when your supply chain reads like an airport departure board. And you can't expect riders to overlook that. Not when they're the ones whose towns lost the factories. In regions like the Midwest and the South, once home to roaring production lines and steady paychecks, silence has replaced the sound of engines. Dealerships that once doubled as community gathering spots are now reduced to quiet showrooms filled with machines that feel foreign in more ways than one. Harley still talks about American heritage in its marketing, but for many, the disconnect between the message and the machinery has become too wide to bridge. The brotherhood breaks. That emotional distance finally snapped. This wasn't a slow drift, it was a break. And the break wasn't just visible in sales data or stock reports, it was visible in inked skin, faded patches, and the worn-down boots of lifelong riders who suddenly felt like strangers to a brand they once called family. Veterans, truckers, mechanics, small-town sheriffs, these weren't just customers. They were culture carriers. They wore Harley like a second skin, passed their bikes down to their kids, and rode together in packs that felt more like platoons than social clubs. When Harley began to shift its tone, more corporate, more sanitized, less grounded, those riders took notice. And they didn't just complain, they walked. Social media exploded with farewell videos. Riders peeled off their Harley patches, threw shirts into bonfires, posted eBay listings with tearful captions. One viral clip showed a Vietnam War veteran auctioning off his fully customized Street Glide, saying simply, "I don't recognize this brand anymore." These weren't political statements. These were identity crises. Riders weren't angry that Harley evolved. They were angry that Harley evolved into something that no longer saw them, into something that spoke in hedge fund language and forgot the poetry of the open road. It wasn't the electrification or the marketing jargon. It was the sense that a promise had been broken. That kind of cultural fracture is hard to quantify but impossible to ignore. When a brand built on rebellion becomes the establishment, the rebellion moves on. And when that happens, the people who once roared down highways now ride in silence, or on something else. Showrooms gone silent. In the wake of this cultural fracture came a brutal business reality. As the riders left, the showrooms went quiet. Dealerships that once rang with conversation and echoed with startup engines began to feel more like museum halls than retail spaces. Staff at regional Harley dealerships reported entire weekends without a single test ride. Sales reps, once busy from open to close, found themselves cleaning helmets and rearranging gloves just to fill the hours. Some dealerships resorted to giveaways, offering free jackets, helmets, even prepaid service packages to entice buyers. In the golden era, those kinds of promotions would have been unthinkable. Inventory backed up. Brand new models with 0 miles sat for months, dust collecting on chrome. The emotional weight from earlier chapters became economic gravity. Customers who once came to browse out of habit stopped showing up. Those who remained weren't just hesitant, they were disengaged. Dealership owners began to speak out, quietly at first, then publicly. Some blamed the national leadership, others blamed inconsistent branding. Many just felt abandoned, caught between a customer base that had vanished and a corporate office that no longer listened. And perhaps most painfully, they knew the truth. The bikes hadn't gotten worse. The bond had. That was the final break. The riders left, then the dealers followed. And in that silence, Harley Davidson heard something it had never heard before. Doubt. The fall of an American icon. It started slowly, almost invisibly. A dip in revenue here, a few layoffs there. Yet within just a few quarters, Harley Davidson transformed from one of America's most iconic brands into a financial cautionary tale. What once stood as a symbol of manufacturing pride and industrial resilience was now shedding value like a bike, losing parts at full speed. Stock prices faltered, analysts downgraded their ratings, investor confidence crumbled. One earnings report after another painted a grim picture. Motorcycle unit sales were in freefall across the United States, revenue had plummeted, and Harley's market share was bleeding away to more agile rivals. What had once been an economic engine was now sputtering in the red. Then came the factories. Towns in the Midwest, once thriving on Harley contracts, watched with dread as layoffs swept through assembly plants and support centers. Entire departments were shuttered. Skilled laborers, many of whom had worked at Harley for over a decade, were shown the door. Local economies began to tremble. Gear shops, small diners, and service garages that had relied on Harley riders saw fewer customers by the week. From boardrooms to back roads, the signal was clear. Harley Davidson was no longer the titan it used to be. It had become a risky bet for investors and a shrinking hope for working-class Americans. The collapse was not just financial, it was symbolic. Once a cornerstone of American industry, Harley became a cautionary tale overnight. Indians rise, Harley's mirror. Across the showroom floor, Indian Motorcycles wasn't celebrating, but it didn't need to. While Harley stumbled, Indian had already built its foundation. No viral stunts, no marketing spectacle, just consistent, thoughtful evolution. The Scout, the Chief, the Challenger, each one rolled off the line with the kind of balance Harley had lost. Thunderous V-twin power, classic lines, modern tech, Indian didn't chase gimmicks. It chased ride quality. And it showed. Forms began to shift. Riders who once lived and breathed Harley began swapping notes on Indian's dependability. smoother torque at delivery, and more responsive handling. Rallies once dominated by Milwaukee steel started to see lines of Indian paint cutting through the crowds. The transition wasn't loud, it was steady, one rider at a time. Indian had watched Harley become distracted. Caught between culture wars and corporate doublespeak, Harley drifted from its roots. Meanwhile, Indian doubled down on performance and tradition. It quietly became the brand Harley fans thought they were buying. In online reviews and dealership floor chatter, a common phrase began to echo: Indian feels like what Harley used to be. And perhaps that was the truest indictment. While Harley chased headlines, Indian chased riders. The global cruiser takeover. While Indian was rebuilding Harley's foundation at home, a new wave of competition was reshaping the global stage. Harley had long believed that the cruiser market was its domain, a blend of retro grit and roaring tradition, but it underestimated the power of refinement, affordability, and international appetite. Triumph Motorcycles of the United Kingdom delivered a masterclass in blending heritage and innovation. The Bonneville Bobber and Speedmaster fused timeless British styling with lightweight handling and cutting-edge electronics. They didn't just echo the cruiser silhouette, they redefined it. Riders seeking that stripped-back vintage feel with modern comfort now had a choice that didn't involve 40 years of brand baggage. Then came Royal Enfield. Once considered a niche player, the company transformed into a global force. The Interceptor 650 and Meteor 350 offered vintage aesthetics at a fraction of Harley's price. The message was simple and brutal. You don't need a second mortgage to ride a good-looking motorcycle. And for riders from Asia to Latin America to urban America, that message hit hard. And there was BMW. With the R18, the German manufacturer crafted a cruiser that looked like it was ripped from a century-old photograph, but rode like it was tuned by a space agency. Precision engineering, exposed shaft drives, and minimalist aggression. It wasn't trying to be Harley, it was something else entirely. For riders disillusioned with brand theatrics and bloated chrome, BMW offered a brutal alternative. As Harley clung to its legacy, the world moved on. Market share drifted east and west. Global sales for competitors surged while Harley's export numbers stagnated. The company didn't lose its global audience to its rivals, it gave them away. History repeats. Japan strikes again. The 80s came back with a vengeance, but smarter this time. Japanese motorcycle makers weren't just returning to the cruiser space, they were refining it. Honda's Rebel series had become a new standard. They offered clean styling, reliable engines, and intuitive handling at prices younger riders could justify. In cities and suburbs alike, these bikes were becoming the go-to choice for first-timers and returning riders who no longer wanted to wrestle with weighty machines. Yamaha answered with the Bolt, a stripped-down, raw cruiser with urban appeal and real grunt. No chrome overload, no bloated design, just throttle response and simplicity. Kawasaki's Vulcan S followed suit, offering ergonomic adaptability and a powerful parallel twin engine in a clean cruiser body. Every bike was tuned not for nostalgia, but for modern needs. These weren't flashy revivals. They were quiet revolutions. Japanese brands studied the American cruiser segment and tailored offerings that were easier to ride, cheaper to maintain, and often more reliable than Harley's big iron. Harley's playbook hadn't changed, theirs had. And in this new game, agility beats tradition, affordability beats image, dependability beats noise. This time, Japan didn't come for Harley's market, they came for its future. The blueprint to win it back. Harley Davidson doesn't need to reinvent itself, it needs to return to the version of itself that worked. Not the one worshipped on investor slides, but the one idolized on garage walls. Because the truth is simple, the blueprint to save Harley has never been more obvious. First, keep affordable models on the lot. That sub-$10,000 price tag on the new Nightster isn't just smart, it's essential. Riders are not begging for high-tech dashboards or semi-autonomous riding aids. They want grit. They want thunder. They want something they can ride home without selling their dignity. Harley must make that kind of accessibility permanent, not a fleeting marketing stunt. Second, even a symbolic return to domestic production could mean everything. It's not about building every bolt in Wisconsin. It's about showing riders that the company still understands what Made in America once stood for. The badge used to mean steel, sweat, and stories passed down through generations. If Harley wants to rebuild trust, it needs to bring some of that soul home. Third, the investor-first mindset has to go. Riders don't care about quarterly earnings or strategic realignment initiatives. They care about how the bike feels under throttle, what it sounds like on a back road, and whether it means something when they park it outside the bar. Harley's leadership must start making decisions that favor the community, not the shareholder slide deck. And then there's the dealer network, the final line between Harley and its people. Those local shops were once temples of culture, not cold points of sale. Harley needs to rebuild those relationships, support those owners, and make sure that when someone walks through a dealership door, they feel like they're coming home, not walking into a corporate outpost. There's a playbook for this. Ducati did it. Their Scrambler line didn't try to be revolutionary, it just reintroduced what riders loved. Simple power, retro design, modern reliability. They remembered who they were and built from there. Harley can do the same, because Harley doesn't need to be new, it needs to be real. Bud Light, Target, and the identity crisis. The collapse of Harley's image didn't happen in a vacuum. Across America, companies are learning a hard lesson. When you abandon the identity your audience built with you, they don't just walk, they revolt. Bud Light made a single branding decision and it set off a wildfire. It wasn't the politics. It was the whiplash, the suddenness, the feeling that everything the brand used to represent had been quietly discarded overnight. Target tried to market its inclusivity without understanding the cultural tightrope it was walking. Disney found itself in the crosshairs not because of its values, but because of the way those values clashed with decades of family-first branding. Harley's story follows the same trajectory. It wasn't just about electric bikes or social statements, it was about a slow drift away from the values that once defined the brand: freedom, rebellion, and a kind of loud, proud Americana that you could smell in the exhaust. These brands didn't fail because they changed. They failed because they changed without taking their audience with them. They confused momentum for transformation and underestimated how deeply their customers saw themselves in the product. In Harley's case, it was the rider looking for belonging, the factory worker who saw their values in that badge, the veteran who remembered the roar of the ride more than the spec sheet. Harley didn't just lose business, it lost reflection. This isn't about being conservative or progressive, it's about continuity. It's about the mirror a brand holds up to the people who choose it. When that mirror cracks, what's left? Harley must now decide whether to repair the glass or replace it entirely. The ones who survived. Not every brand caught in a cultural tailspin collapsed. Some came out stronger, not because they avoided controversy, but because they never lost clarity. Chick-fil-A remains one of the most polarizing brands in America, yet it also remains one of the most successful. Why? Because whether you agree with them or not, you know exactly what they stand for. There are no surprises, no pivots, no apology tours. Ducati once faced a similar crisis. The brand was adrift, caught between its racing legacy and an irrelevant future. Then they introduced the Scrambler, not as a gimmick, but as a reassertion of what Ducati meant. It was fast, simple, stylish, and unapologetically Italian. These brands prove something vital. Survival isn't about staying neutral, it's about staying authentic. You can take a stand, but only if your audience knows it's real. Harley doesn't have to win everyone. It never did. The strongest brands don't try to please everyone. They speak so clearly only the right people stay. That's the company Harley once was, and it's the only path back to what it could be. The road ahead. This new Nightster, priced at $9,999, isn't just a bike, it's a test. A test of Harley Davidson's willingness to return to its roots, not in design alone, but in identity. Because this is more than a motorcycle. It's a turning point. An unspoken acknowledgement that Harley pushed too far, flew too high, and left behind the very riders who gave it flight in the first place. Now the question becomes, will they keep going down this road? Will they double down on affordability, soul, and community, or slip back into investor-friendly illusions wrapped in chrome? This story is still being written, but one thing is certain. Harley's next move will define more than their balance sheet. It will decide whether this brand still belongs to the people who made it iconic, or whether it's destined to become another American myth, fading quietly into history. This might be Harley's last chance to roar, or the quiet beginning of their ride into memory. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And if this story matters to you, hit the like and subscribe button. We're just getting started.